Grace looked John dead in his face and said, "You'll get over it. You always come back," after he found out she'd been sleeping with Marcus, his so-called good friend. Not a tear, not a flinch. Then she grabbed her keys, kissed their wedding photo on the wall like it was a joke, and walked out to go spend the night at Marcus's place in Atlanta. John stood there in their Charlotte kitchen with a plate still in his hand, like somebody had paused his life mid-motion. The cruel part wasn't just the cheating. It was the confidence she had that he'd beg. Here's how it happened. John and Grace met in Durham at a summer cookout behind somebody's auntie's apartment complex, the kind with folding chairs, loud laughter, and somebody always burning the first round of hot dogs. John showed up late wearing a wrinkled polo and a smile he used when he didn't want people to see how nervous he was. Grace was by the speaker, swaying like the music personally owed her joy. When John offered her a plate, he put too much potato salad on it, and she laughed so hard she snorted. "You tried," she teased. He liked her immediately. Their first real date was at a little spot in downtown Raleigh where the waitress called everybody baby like she meant it. John tried to act smooth, but his wallet spilled receipts everywhere when he paid. Grace watched him scramble, then calmly helped pick them up. "You a mess," she said, smiling. John grinned. "Only on special occasions." They walked around after, sharing a slice of cake from a bakery and arguing playfully about whether sweet tea should be sweet or diabetes with ice. Grace bumped his shoulder and said, "You're funny, John." That felt like a blessing. When they got serious, romance looked like ordinary things. Grace leaving him notes in his lunchbox, John filling her gas tank without saying anything, both of them dancing in socks on the living room carpet while old-school R&B played. They weren't rich, but their love felt like they were building something clean with their hands. John proposed in Charlotte at a park near the water, hands shaking, voice cracking on the words. Grace said yes so fast she scared a jogger nearby. Later she joked, "I almost tackled you. Don't play with me." John laughed until he cried. John wasn't perfect, though. He had pride like a bad habit. He came from a family where men didn't talk about feelings. They just carried them like bricks and called it strength. Early in the marriage, he messed up, cheated once during a rough stretch when he felt small and ashamed and didn't know how to say it out loud. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't exciting. It was weak. He confessed because the lie started eating him alive. Grace's face went still in a way that scared him more than yelling would have. She didn't swing. She didn't scream. She just said, "So what now?" John didn't defend himself. He didn't blame stress or alcohol or anything else. He owned it. He got into therapy in Charlotte, the kind of place with soft lighting and tissues everywhere, and he learned how to sit in discomfort without running. He wrote Grace letters he never expected her to forgive. He gave her passwords, answered her questions, took her anger without arguing back. He stopped hanging with certain friends. He started coming home on time, not as a performance, but because he wanted to be the kind of man whose word meant something. Grace decided to stay, but it changed the balance between them, quiet as shifting sand. For a while, they looked good again. They had inside jokes. They had Sunday mornings with pancakes, music, and Grace threatening to fire John from flipping duties because he kept tearing the edges. One time he tried to surprise her with breakfast in bed and spilled orange juice across the sheets. Grace stared at the mess, then stared at him, then laughed so hard she had to cover her mouth. "You thought you were a movie," she said. John bowed dramatically. "I'm the director's cut." She kissed his forehead anyway. Those moments felt like proof they could survive. Marcus came around during that good again period. He was from John's old circle, the type who always had a clean fade and a joke ready. Marcus would show up with wings and stories, calling John my brother, dapping him up in their living room like he paid rent there. Grace seemed to like Marcus's humor. Marcus knew how to compliment people without sounding corny. "Grace, you keep this man looking sharp," he'd say. John used to feel proud, like his home was warm enough for friends. He didn't notice Marcus watching Grace a little too long, laughing a little too hard. Life got heavy in the normal ways. John worked long shifts, trying to stack savings. Grace started feeling stuck at her job and talked about wanting more travel, more freedom, more softness in her days. John heard her, but he also heard bills. Sometimes he responded with solutions when she wanted comfort. That gap became a crack. John tried to fix it with gestures, flowers, dates, little weekend trips to Asheville. But Grace's smile didn't always reach her eyes. Still, she'd post pictures and people would comment goals, and John would tell himself they were fine. The shift started small. Grace became protective of her phone, tilting the screen away like it was a reflex. She took more girls' nights, came back with a bright energy that didn't include John. When John asked how her night went, she'd say, "It was cool," and switch topics fast. John tried not to be paranoid because of his past. He told himself he didn't deserve to police her. He told himself trust meant swallowing fists sometimes. But the house started feeling like two people living near each other instead of together. John could feel something slipping and couldn't catch it. Marcus became a regular presence in their lives, too regular. He offered to help John with anything, car trouble, yard work, even picking up groceries if John was stuck at work. It sounded generous. It sounded like brotherhood. Marcus would text John, "Need anything," then also text Grace, "You're good," and John thought that was community. Once, Marcus joked, "Man, if you ever mess up again, Grace might trade you in." Grace laughed. John forced a laugh too, but something about it landed wrong. Marcus's eyes stayed calm. Grace's laugh stayed easy. John's stomach tightened like it had its own intelligence. One night in Charlotte, John came home early because his shift got cut. He expected the house to be quiet. Instead, he heard laughter in the kitchen. Grace's laugh and Marcus's laugh, braided together like they belonged. John walked in and saw them leaning close over the counter, looking at something on Grace's phone. They jumped apart just a little too quickly. Grace didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed. "You're home early," she said, like he'd interrupted her show. Marcus gave John a grin. "Bro, we was just talking about vacations." John nodded slowly, pretending the air didn't feel different. John tried to talk to Grace later that night in their bedroom, voice careful. "You and Marcus, you'll seem close." Grace rolled her eyes. "So now you're insecure?" John swallowed. "I'm not accusing you. I'm saying I feel." Grace cut him off. "You feel what? Like I owe you reassurance forever because you messed up years ago?" "John, please." That sentence stung because it was true and weaponized at the same time. John didn't want to argue. He just wanted to be held. Instead, he got a wall. Grace turned over and said, "Go to sleep." The next months felt like living on a bruise. John tried harder, planned a date night in Raleigh, booked a hotel with a nice view, even recreated their first cookout vibe with music and homemade food. Grace smiled for pictures, but she stayed half present, phone buzzing like a metronome. At dinner, John reached for her hand and she let him hold it for exactly 3 seconds before pulling away to check a message. John tried to make a joke. "Tell your secret boyfriend he can't have you tonight." Grace laughed without warmth. "You're not funny." John felt the embarrassment rise like heat. He finished his meal quietly. Marcus stayed around, and somehow he became the person Grace vented to. John overheard her once on the balcony saying, "He just doesn't get me." Her voice softened in a way John hadn't heard in a while. John stepped back before she saw him. Later he asked, "You talking about me?" Grace shrugged. "People talk, John." That night John stayed at the ceiling and thought about karma, about how the universe collects receipts. He also thought about his own. He thought, maybe this is payback. Maybe I'm just getting what I earned. That thought made him accept too much for too long. The betrayal finally showed itself on a random Tuesday. John's phone died at work, and he used a coworker's charger to power it up. Messages flooded in. One was from Marcus, meant for Grace, because Marcus had accidentally clicked John's name. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't sweet. It was casual and cruel. "Tell your husband stop acting like you're not coming back. He's trained." John read it twice, blinking like the words might rearrange themselves. His chest tightened, then went strangely quiet. Not peaceful, just numb, like his body turned the volume down so he wouldn't break. John went home to Charlotte and waited at the kitchen table, hands folded, like he was waiting for a verdict. Grace walked in humming, tossed her purse down, and froze when she saw his face. "What's wrong with you?" she asked. John slid the phone across the table and said, "Explain." Grace glanced at it and didn't even try to lie. She sighed like he was tiring. "So you found out," she said. John's voice cracked. "How long?" Grace shrugged. "Long enough." John asked, "Why Marcus?" Grace's mouth curved. "Because he listens, and he doesn't need to be coached on how to be a man." John felt his own flaws rise up like ghosts. He wanted to shout, "I changed." He wanted to point to therapy receipts and late nights and all the ways he tried to be better. But Grace's face wasn't open to hearing any of it. She wasn't remorseful. She was bored. When John whispered, "You really did this," Grace shrugged again. "You did what you did first, remember?" John nodded slowly, because she wasn't wrong about the timeline, but she was wrong about everything else. Grace took her keys and said, "I'm going to Marcus's. Don't be dramatic." Then she delivered the line that sealed it, "You always come back." For 2 days, John moved like he was underwater. He went to work. He answered emails. He laughed at a joke he didn't hear. At night he sat in his car in the parking lot outside his apartment building and stared at nothing, feeling hollow and heavy at the same time. He didn't call Marcus because he didn't trust what his anger would do. He didn't call Grace because he didn't want to beg. He called his therapist instead and said, "I don't know who I am right now." The therapist told him to focus on what he could control. John hated that advice. Then he realized it was all he had. John's suffering wasn't just heartbreak. It was humiliation. People he trusted started acting weird. Grace's cousin unfollowed him, then posted cryptic quotes about self-love. Marcus stopped answering John's texts like the friendship never existed. Even John's own mom said, "Well, you did cheat first," as if the past erased the present. John didn't defend himself, because he couldn't. He just felt the loneliness stack. Some nights he ate cereal for dinner standing over the sink because sitting down felt like admitting how empty the house was. He'd catch himself reaching for Grace's side of the bed, then pull his hand back like it touched a hot stove. In the middle of all that pain, something funny happened that almost made him cry. John tried to do laundry and accidentally used too much detergent. The washing machine started foaming like a science experiment. Bubbles crept across the laundry room floor and into the hallway like they were trying to escape. John stayed, then laughed, an ugly laugh, a shocked laugh, because his life was falling apart and the universe had the nerve to add slapstick. He spent an hour mopping up suds, muttering, "This is what I get for buying Mountain Fresh anything." For a few minutes, he felt human again. John didn't decide to glow up. He decided to survive. He met a lawyer in a strip mall office outside Charlotte during his lunch break, hands shaking so badly he had to grip the pen like it was trying to run away. He learned what he could do and what he couldn't, what was legally his, what was shared, what needed to be documented. He opened a new bank account and rerouted his direct deposit. He changed passwords. He pulled his credit report and found accounts he didn't recognize, store cards, small loans, balances that looked like quiet panic. His stomach dropped. Grace had been spending like tomorrow wasn't real. John wanted to confront Grace about the debt, but he remembered the look in her eyes. She didn't care how he felt. She cared about what she could get away with. So John got practical. He separated what was his responsibility from what was his and began paying down his portion with a focus that surprised even him. It wasn't revenge. It was cleanup. It was learning, again, that love without boundaries turns into a hostage situation. He stopped paying her phone bill and moved his line to a different plan. He didn't shut off her service. He just stopped rescuing her. That was his new rule. No more saving people who enjoy drowning you. Grace tested him. She called, angry, demanding. "Why is the phone acting weird?" John kept his voice calm. "You'll need to handle your own plan." Grace scoffed. "So you're punishing me?" John almost laughed. The audacity was loud. "Grace, I'm just not funding disrespect," he said. She cursed him out and hung up. Marcus texted from an unknown number. "You really gonna act like a victim?" John stayed at the message, then blocked the number without replying. He didn't feel powerful. He felt sad, the kind of sad that sits in your throat. But he also felt something new, control over his next step. John's lawyer told him something that felt like permission. He didn't have to keep living in a place that held so many memories it hurt to breathe. The house was in John's name from before the marriage. Grace had treated that home like a stage for her disrespect, like John was the background character. John decided to close the chapter quietly. He listed the house, signed what he needed to sign, and kept it businesslike. Packing was brutal. Every box felt like an autopsy. He found a movie ticket from their first date and had to sit on the floor to steady himself. Then he taped the box shut anyway. There was still room for romance in his story, just not the kind he expected. One evening, while sorting through old photos, John found a picture of him and Grace dancing in socks, both of them laughing like the world was gentle. He didn't rip it up. He didn't care. He just sat with it and admitted the truth. There was real love in there once. He whispered, "I did love you," and felt tears run down his face. That wasn't weakness. That was honesty. He put the photo in an envelope labeled past, not because he wanted to forget, but because he refused to live inside it. The karma hit Grace and Marcus suddenly, but realistically. Marcus had been renting a lifestyle, car payments, designer shoes, flashy dinners, more image than foundation. Once John stopped being the quiet safety net Grace could lean on, she leaned harder on Marcus, and Marcus started cracking. Late fees piled up. A credit card got declined at a restaurant. Grace tried to laugh it off, but her eyes tightened. Then, one morning in Atlanta, a repossession truck backed into the apartment complex parking lot. Grace ran outside in a robe, furious, yelling like volume could change contracts. Marcus tried to charm the driver. The driver didn't care. Neither did the bank. The tow chains sounded like a verdict. Grace called John right after, voice sharp with blame, still no remorse. "You did this on purpose," she snapped. John sat in his new apartment outside Raleigh, the quiet kind of quiet he used to fear. He didn't raise his voice. "No," he said. "You did this. I just stopped cleaning it up." Grace started to argue, but John cut her off gently. "Grace, I'm not your life raft anymore." Then he hung up. He didn't feel victorious. He felt free. Later, he laughed for real when he realized he could finally buy detergent without fear of somebody else's mess becoming his emergency. John's transformation wasn't loud. It was private and successful. His credit score climbed because his money wasn't leaking into chaos. His sleep got deeper because he wasn't sharing a bed with uncertainty. He started running again, not to impress anybody, just to feel his lungs work and his mind quiet down. He cooked real meals. He kept therapy. He learned how to apologize without groveling and how to forgive without re-entering harm. The moral he wrote for himself was simple: accountability can rebuild you, but boundaries protect what you rebuild. Love that demands you beg isn't love, it's control. John chose himself, and that choice finally chose him back. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.